Maseches Yevamos Daf Chavav concludes the second parak of the Masechta and begins the third. The beginning of the daf until the end of the second parak discusses several exceptions to the rules we've seen up till now about when a person is not allowed to marry a woman that he helped be matir to marry to others because of the fact that it looks suspicious. And then we'll begin the third parak, which discusses the famous case of the four brothers, two of whom were married to two sisters, which we've seen quoted a number of times thus far. So let's begin. The Gemara has been discussing a number of circumstances in which a person helped a woman become a mutter to marry others, helped her get divorced or freed from her husband. So the examples were somebody testified that her husband had died, or somebody brought her get and said, or someone was a Talmud Chacham who paskin that it was mutter for her or correct for her to leave her husband and marry somebody else. In all these three circumstances, the person who either testified, brought the get, or paskin is not allowed to marry her because it seems suspicious that he was involved in freeing her to marry someone else, and then he went and he married her himself. So our Mishnah, we begin the daf with a Mishnah that lists three exceptions to this rule. Exception number one is if at the time that the psak or the get was brought or the testimony happened, the man had another wife, and then that wife died. Now the Mishnah says specifically that she died. The Gemara will pick up on that. But therefore there's no suspicion here because he was married to a woman at that time, and therefore there's no reason for him to think that he had wanted to marry this woman, which is why he helped free her from her husband. Now, if later she died, we just assume that this is a new relationship which developed afterwards and does not show any suspicion about the original thing. Now, the second exception to the rule is if the woman went and married somebody else first, and then she was either freed from them, and either by the fact that he died or they got divorced, either of those two. It's important that the Mishnah mentions both of them. Then, so if that happened, it does not look suspicious that she later then goes and marries the person who helped free her from her first marriage, because it was a second marriage in between the first marriage and marrying this person who helped free her. And the third case is not that he himself, the chacham, the shliach, or the aid, can marry her, but that his son or his brother is allowed to marry her. We do not say that it looks suspicious that he hatched a plot in cahoots to free her from her husband in order that she could marry his brother or his son. Okay, the Gemara begins now. The Gemara first of all picks up on the fact that when it says that the chacham, the aid, or the shliach had another wife, it says that then that wife went and then died. That seems to say only that she died. However, if he then divorced her, that would appear suspicious because it could be that he wanted to marry this woman, which is why he testified or paskin that she's free, and then he went and divorced his wife. So that would, because he had control over freeing himself from his wife, it could be that he did have ulterior motives when he freed her from her husband at that time. So the Gemara says that seems to be the implication here. It's only if she died, not if she got divorced. This contradicts the Brisa that says whether she died or she got divorced, both are true. So the Gemara gives two answers to the contradiction. The Gemara says it's possible that there is a difference between two types of divorces, and that's were they fighting already before this testimony happened. If they were fighting before the aid, the shliach, or the chacham, passing that she's free, that would seem to indicate he was already looking for another spouse. He was already planning on divorcing her. Rashi actually says the other way. Rashi says that in the situation where they were fighting already, it would seem to show that the fight that led to the divorce had nothing to do with the fact that he was able to free this woman and saw this woman and had a desire for her. They were fighting already before then. This divorce was in the works before he ever met this woman, before he was ever involved in freeing her. That's how Rashi learns it. You could say the other way, but that's how Rashi explains it. So that's the case in which the divorce is good reason to say that he's allowed to marry her, because this divorce had nothing to do with her. However, in a circumstance where he started the divorce proceedings and he started the fight after he freed this woman, that would seem to indicate that he possibly had this plan all along. He wanted to free this woman from her husband, and then he went and picked a fight with his wife and divorced her so that he can marry this one, and it does appear suspicious. The Gemara's second answer is that both are talking about where they picked a fight later. They were in peace at the time. The question is who picked the fight. If the fight was picked by this guy's wife, so then you can't blame him for having had a plot to free this woman from her husband and then pick a fight with his wife and divorce her, because she went and picked the fight. If, however, he picked the fight, then that does look suspicious, and then you would have a problem. Okay, now the Gemara moves on to the second phrase in the Mishnah, which was, we had seen that if the woman who was freed by her husband by this Chacham aid, or shliach, if she went and married somebody else, and then that person either died or was divorced. So the Gemara says, well, it would seem to be that if her second husband, died, then the original person is allowed to marry her, even if he was the way he freed her was that he had testified that her first husband had died. So it was that she was married to one man, and then this person testified that the first husband died. Then she married a second man, and he died. This person is allowed to free her. Now, would also seem that if she got divorced would be, even if she was divorced from her first husband, that would be the case where the man came and brought the get and said, and that helped her get divorced from her first husband. Then she married a second man who was divorced from him. So now this man's allowed to marry her. So Gemara says this seems to show that we don't hold, like Rabbi holds that 2 times is a chazaka. If 2 times would be a chazaka, then the fact that this woman had 2 husbands who died would make her a chazaka that her husbands are going to die. A person like that is to usher for anybody to marry. It's also, Rashi says, would make a chazaka if she was divorced twice, that she's going to get divorced, and therefore nobody should marry her. So the Gemara says, it would seem to be not like Rabbi. The Gemara says, no, it's not what happened. It's actually that the case where her second husband died is going on the case where she was divorced from her first husband, so there's no chazaka. And the case where her second husband, she was divorced from him, was where her first husband had died, and therefore there's no chazaka there either. Alright, now the Gemara goes on to discuss the third exception in the Mishnah, which is that they are allowed to marry the Chacham Eid or Shliach's son or brother. So the Gemara says, how is that different from a different Mishnah? There's a Mishnah that says if somebody is under suspicion of being together with a woman, he is not allowed to marry her mother or her daughter. Now, that's not because there's any isser in marrying her mother or her daughter, because the fact that he was, even if he had been together with this woman without chuppah and kiddushin, that does not create an isser on her mother or her daughter midaraisa. The isser is only for him to be together with a woman who is the mother or the daughter of somebody who he was married to. So what we're afraid of is what's going to happen as follows. If he goes and he marries her mother or her daughter, then he will go and be together with this woman, and that would be also because then he would be being together with the mother or the daughter of his wife. That's what's usher. Now, Rashi says, our kasha is as follows. We're filling in here that we're suspicious that if he's going to marry her mother or her daughter, that's because we're assuming that they have some plot. And by him being married to her mother or her daughter, they'll give them an excuse to spend time together, and that will be a pretense for znus. So the kasha is that when this man frees, in our Mishnah, where this man frees a woman from her marriage, and then she goes and marries his brother or his son, that could be a pretext for the two of them to spend time together again. Just like over there, he's marrying her mother or her daughter as a pretext for them to spend time together. Here, having her marry her son or his brother could be a pretext for them to spend time together. Someone says, no, it doesn't work like that. Being married to a woman's mother or daughter is a pretext for them to spend time together, because women usually spend time with their close relatives, and if he's married to her mother or her daughter, he'll spend time with her. However, men don't spend time with their close relatives, and therefore the fact that this woman's married to his brother or his son is not going to be a reason for her to spend time with him. Another potential answer, the Gemara says, is that the women have to be in cahoots, and women don't mind if he's mizana with their mother or their daughter, because it doesn't aser her. She doesn't become aser. She herself is fine, even if he has zos with their mother or their daughter. So they would cooperate with that plot. However, if it's another man, if it will be his brother or his son, they would not cooperate, because that would make them aser. Because a woman, if their wife is mizana, then they would be aser, because a woman who's mizana is aser to Baal and aser to the Boel. When it says if that's true, then it should be true that she's also allowed to marry his father, because then his father would also not allow it. So why do we only say the brother or the son? When it says no, the father is also true. The brother or son is a bigger chiddush. The father, not such a chiddush, because there's no suspicion, because a person is naturally embarrassed before his father, is naturally in fear of his father, and would not try to get into a plot like this involving his father. However, his brother and his son, he doesn't have fear of, and therefore you may think that he would be involved in such a plot. The chiddush is that such a plot would not take place. This concludes the second parak, and now we get to the beginning of the third parak of Meseches Yevamos. We begin with the Mishnah that discusses the case of the 4 brothers married to 2 sisters. So you have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, 4 brothers. Reuven and Shimon are married to sisters, Rachel and Leah. Reuven and Shimon die. Rachel and Leah fall to Yibam, to Levi and Yehuda. Now, the original halacha in the simplest case here is that both women are usher to both men, because both are the sister of the skukah. Both women have a zika. They're both falling to Yibam to both men. each from the brother, each from their husband who died, and these two are sisters. Rachel and Leah are sisters. Therefore, each one is achos zikukaso of the other, and achos zikukaso is similar midrabanan to achos ishto, and therefore is aser. So neither of them could do yibum. They both have to do chalitza. One of the men could do chalitza to each one, or one could do chalitza to both of them. Now, if they went ahead and they did yibum, then we have a machlokes what halacha is. The Tanna Kama says the halacha is that they have to take them out. They can't do yibum because they violated the Isra Achos Zikukaso. Rabbi Eliezer says it's dependent on the machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel whether there's an Isra Zika or not. Beis Shammai says they can stay married. No Isra. And Beis Hillel says they have to set them free. They cannot stay married. Now the Mishnah discusses what happens if one of them was an erva. So if only one of the women was an erva, let's say a chamoso or an achoso to one of the brothers, let's say Rachel was an erva to Levi, so Rachel and Levi have no Zika connection, there is no Isser there, and therefore Leah has a perfect unaffected Zika to Levi, and Levi can do Yibum to Leah, there's no problem at all. The other brother, that is Yehuda, he has the same achos zikukasa issue. He has to do chalitza or nothing. He cannot get involved with either of these. Now, if both of them are an erva, that is Rachel is an erva to Levi, and Leah is an erva to Yehuda, then each one is allowed to marry the other one. The one who is not his erva can do even because of the fact that they are in a situation where there's an erva, there is no zika, and therefore there's no achos zikukasa. Says the Mishnah, this is the case that we said, when his sister is also the Yevama, that's this case, the sister of the Erva is also the Yevama, she could do either Yibum or Chalitza, because the fact that she's the sister of the Erva means that she's the only Yavam who's really falling, the Erva is not falling to Yibum at all. We now begin the Gemara. The Gemara wants to know what is the reason for this halacha. We've already said it's because of Zika, and we've already discussed earlier that there are two potential reasons to explain this. The Gemara first says that the simplest explanation would be because of Yesh Zika, and therefore each of these two women, both Rachel and Leah, are a sister of a Zikuka, and that's why they are both Aser. So you see here that we hold Yesh Zika, this Mishnah holds Yesh Zika, but whether Yesh Zika or Ein Zika, whether that's true or not is a machlokes. So the Gemara says, no, the other approach, you could hold Ein Zika and still have an explanation for this Mishnah, and that's because of Aser Levatel Mitzvahs Yibum. We're afraid that if we allow Levi to do Yibum to, let's say, Rachel, even if he's allowed to, and the fact that she's Achos Zikukasa, the sister of his Zikuka Leah, that's not a problem. We're afraid if we allow Levi to do Yibum to Rachel, then Yehuda will die before he has a chance to do Yibum to Leah, and then Leah will fall to Yibum to Levi, and now she's the sister of his wife because he did Yibum, and therefore she's going to end up being pater without any Yibum or Chalitza. We don't want that to happen. We want to avoid a situation where Yibum and Chalitza won't happen. We want to have at least one of them happen. We don't want to be mevatel mitzvahs Yibum. Therefore, we say that he shouldn't do Yibum, he should do Chalitza, and therefore even if Yehuda will die, he could still do Chalitza because she's only Achos Chalutzoso, she's not Achos Yevimto, she's not the sister of his wife. So the Gemara says, if that's true, so why do I need four brothers? Why do I need Yehuda here? I could have the same halacha be taught with only Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Now, how does this work out? So if we're saying the reason is because of Zika, that she's also because of Achos Zikuka, so I understand why Yehuda is there. If I would only have Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, and Reuven, Shimon had died, and Rachel and Leah fell to Yibum to Levi, and there both of them are also because they are Achos Zikukaso, that's not as much a chiddush as if Yehuda was there, because when there's two brothers, the Zika to each of them is weaker. So it's teaching me that even though there's two brothers, there's Levi and Yehuda, and the Zika is a weak Zika because it's divided between Levi and Yehuda, still we say that the Zika is strong enough to Aser. So there I understand. However, if you're telling me the reason is because Aslevato Mitzvah Yibum, so then just have Reuven and Shimon, and their wives, Rachel and Leah, fall to Yibum to Levi, and he can't do Yibum to one of them, because then the other one will be his wife, and she'll get off scot-free without any Yibum or Chalitza. So therefore, just say that I have Yehuda, that I have Levi. Why do I need Yehuda in this case? So the Gemara says you need Yehuda, because in the case of Yehuda, it's only a suffix you'll be mevatel mitzvahs Yibum, because maybe Yehuda won't die. Maybe Yehuda will go and do Yibum or Chalitza to Leah. It's only a suffix, maybe Yehuda will die, and therefore if Levi will do Yibum, you'll be mevatel mitzvahs Yibum on the second sister. The chiddush is that even though it's a suffix mevatel mitzvahs Yibum, we still say not to do it. But certainly it would be true in a case where it was just Levi, and it's a Vadai mitzvah Yibam that's being Mavatel. There we would certainly say that Levi should not do Yibam, he should do Chalitza. Says the Gemara, so if you want to teach me that you Choshesh V'Sfekes, so say even if there are 5 brothers, have Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar, and then say that Levi can't do Yibam because maybe Yehuda and Yisachar will both die, and he won't be able to be Miyabim, the second sister. He won't be able to do Yibam or Chalitza because she'll be the sister of his wife. The Gemara says no. The reason we didn't say this is because it's not true. We are not Choshesh for 2 people to die. Yehuda and Yisachar both die is not Shchiach. We're only Choshesh if there's Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, then maybe Yehuda will die. We're not Choshesh that Yehuda and Yisachar will die. The Gemara now introduces another case with 5 brothers. And the Gemara is going to show Machlokes Rav and Shmuel what the halacha is in this case. So let's get this case down. So you have 5 brothers. Reuven, Shimon, Levi are married to 3 sisters. Rachel, Leah, Bilhah. And then there are 2 other brothers, Yehuda, Yisachar. Now, all 3 brothers die. All 3 sisters fall to Yibam before Yehuda and Yisachar. Now, of Machlokes Rav and Shmuel. So, Rava bar Rav Huna in the name of Rav says as follows. They have to do Chalitza. So the first brother, let's say Yehuda, does Chalitza to Rachel. She's free. Yisachar will do Chalitza to Leah. She's free. But then Bilhah, both brothers have to do Chalitza. It's not enough for one of them to do Chalitza. So the Gemara says, okay, how do you understand this? I understand that the reason that you want the third sister, you want to build to get Chalitza from both of them is because it's not a good Chalitza. Because the Chalitza is weak. Because he could not have done Yibum. If one of those 2 brothers is to do Chalitza on Bilhah, so she's Achos Chalutzaso. You're not allowed to do Yibum to Achos Chalutzaso. So it's a Chalitza where he couldn't do Yibum. That's a weak Chalitza. It doesn't work if it's only from one brother to pater the Zika to the other brother. Since it's a weak Chalitza, they both have to do it. If that's true, it should apply to the first 2 brothers as well, because they're also doing a Chalitza where they couldn't do Yibum, because it's a Achos Zikukaso. All 3 women fell to Yibum to both brothers. So each one who did Chalitza was an Achos Zikukaso. It was a Zika, it was a Chalitza that couldn't be a Yibum. So it should also be too weak to pater the other brother, and therefore all 3 women should have to have Chalitza from both brothers. So Gemara says no. If the case was that they all fell at once to Yibam, and then they were all Achos Zikukaso, you'd be right. The case is where they fell one at a time, each one fell to Yibam after the other one had a Chalitza. So let's go through it. Reuven died, Reuven's wife Rachel fell to Yibam, and then Yehuda went and did Chalitza. Now this was a perfect Chalitza. There's nothing wrong with this Chalitza. He could have done Yibam, she wasn't Achos anything. Okay, so she's totally free, that's totally good, she doesn't need anything else. Then Shimon died, and his wife fell to Yibam before all of them. Now Yisachar does Chalitza. This is not Achos Chalutzaso, because he didn't do Chalitza to Rachel. His brother Yehuda did. Yisachar is doing Chalitza to a woman who has not a sister of any Skuka. There's also not Achos Zikukaso, because the original Zika of Rachel is over once Yehuda did Chalitza. So when Yisachar does Chalitza, that's a perfect Chalitza, there's nothing wrong with that. However, the 3rd brother dies, Levi dies, and now Bilhah falls to Yibam. Who's going to do this Chalitza? The only 2 brothers around are Yehuda and Yisachar, and both have already done a Chalitza to her sister. So she's a Achos Chalutzaso to both of them. Therefore, whoever's going to do Chalitza is going to be weak, and the other one has to do Chalitza as well. So that's how it all works out. So then Rav says, this clearly shows, though, that Rav holds of Yesh Zika. But we have a halacha where Rav says, Ein Zika. Rav says, you're allowed to marry the mother of your Zkuka. Rav says, Rav is saying this according to the opinion Yesh Zika. Rav himself doesn't hold of it. Now the Gemara goes into Shmuel's approach. This was all Rav. Now what does Shmuel paskin in this case? So the Gemara says that Shmuel says, one brother could do Chalitza, and that's enough. That paters everyone. Each one needs one Chalitza. They don't need any more Chalitza. From all 3 of them, they only need one Chalitza. So Shmuel says, why? Shmuel holds you need a good Chalitza. Shmuel holds you can't get away with a Shvacha Chalitza. We see that because Shmuel says if you have 2 sisters falling to Yibam and each one has a tzara, so you can't do Chalitza to the sisters and pater the tzara, because that's a Achos Zikukaso Chalitza. It doesn't pater the tzara. I have to do Chalitza to the tzara, and that'll pater the Achos Zikukaso. Can't do the other way around, because it's a weak Chalitza. You see, Shmuel does require a high level Chalitza. This should not be a good Chalitza. Says the Gemara, yes, you're right. Shmuel also holds that only the 3rd one could have, that the 3rd one requires Chalitza from all of them. The first two chalitzas were fine. Each one was an independent chalitza. It was good enough. You don't have to, but the third one requires chalitza from all of them, just like Rav. So Gemara says, but he said that they all require chalitza from all of them. How do you understand that? I mean, it should be fine here, because the first one had a chalitza from a brother who was not, there's nothing wrong with his chalitza, and the second one had a chalitza, there's nothing wrong with his chalitza. So what's the problem over here? So Gemara says, no, Shmuel only meant that the third one requires chalitza from all the brothers, which is in this case both brothers, because it was a weak chalitza. So Gemara says, well, why does he say all? Gemara says, he says all because she's having the majority of the chalitzas. She had chalitza from one, because she has chalitzas from both brothers, therefore she's called all. Says the Gemara, another pshat is that Shmuel only holds you need a good chalitza to pater tzara. To pater she herself, any weak chalitza works. You cannot learn from the fact that Shmuel says it doesn't work on the tzara, that it doesn't work on she herself.